Hi everybody, I'm back. I'm Heide Lang from the Fit Cooking School, and for those of you who watched the first video, we're talking about salt. This is our second video, so we're going to call this Salt Part 2 because there's so much to talk about salt. And it's the kind of thing that when I read cookbooks, they always talk about, they'll sometimes say kosher salt, briefly mentioned, but they never really tell you why it's so very important. So I'm going to presume you saw the first one. We went through the basics, and now we're going to do advanced placement salt. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Anyone, again, who's taken a class of mine knows that I spend sometimes way too much time talking about sea salt. Why? Because it has such flavor and brings so much to a meal. But it's not the kind of salt you use to boil water because it's too expensive and it doesn't do you any good. So these are special salts we use for seasoning, after when you're sauteing something, or when you're serving your lovely string beans with a little cracked pepper and salt and so on and so forth. And so we're going to start with the one, my favorite, which is fleur de sel. This salt is primarily the best sea salt of fleur de sel is from France. It comes from an area called Brittany. Well, why is it so special from there? Because the French care so much about their food that they even care about how the salt is harvested, believe it or not. You can't use metal forks, you can't use metal rakes in France to harvest the salt. So it has to dry on these beds by the ocean, and then is harvested by wooden rakes. Why is that so important? Because again, we don't want any metallic taste. I talked about earlier, I talked about iodine, and how we don't want that. We want the pure taste of the salt. So that's what you get with sea salt. And I accidentally brought out the other one. That's for our next one. We're going to talk about the first, which is again fleur de sel. And as you can see, it's also pretty coarse, but not as coarse as chunky kosher salt, which many people know of. This salt is pure white, and again, we use this when we're sautéing or when our meal is complete as a finishing salt. The next one we're going to talk about is a variation on sea salt, but it's called sel gris. I'm not allowed to use any foreign words, by the way, in my videos because I have a terrible foreign accent and my daughters are both linguists. So you'll see me often saying things like gray sea salt. It's actually sel gris. Don't tell them that I'm using that term because I'm not really supposed to use foreign words, but that is actually what it is. It's very different. And we have a large jar here. I wanted to show you this one because this one you can actually buy in some American supermarkets. Not necessarily your local Big Y or ShopRite, but you can get it at Whole Foods. And if you don't have a Whole Foods near you and you want to use some of these specialized salts, you can order them at Penzies.com and Salt.com. We keep it in a big jar here so that it's easy for us to have access to. Well, what do we do with this one? For goodness sakes, please don't put this on your chicken cutlets because it's extremely salty and very chunky. We use this to make things like, and don't be afraid of this term because we're going to get to making this one day, months from now, steak au poivre, steak with pepper, but also has a lot of salt. It creates a coating on the outside. And when we use this, we put it on a very thick piece of meat or something very thick, and it actually melts into the tenderloin or the sirloin steak or a roast. And it tenderizes but also gives a great deal of flavor, and then we often sear it. We'll get to that another day. Here, so more advanced placement kind of salt would be a maldon. It's very, very flaky. It almost looks like a snowflake. And you'll see, I'll take some out for you. These are very, very, very big and flat flakes of salt. This is used, now chefs like to use this in their restaurants because it makes things look very pretty, and that's how we use it also. It's also not something that you use every day because it's a little bit pricey, but one of these little containers goes a very long way. So if you want something that looks really pretty, almost like snow, on top of vegetables or a stew right before you serve it, this is a great one. So we're done today. We've given you the basics of salt. And from here, we're going to go to some other things in our next video. So see you soon.